The Battle of the Bulge began on December 16th, 1944. What was it about this specific chapter in World War II history that so captivated your attention?
This was not a battle that was supposed to happen. This was a surprise. We thought we would be ending the war by Christmas 1944. The Germans were on the run. But the Americans ran out of fuel and ammunition because the supply lines were so long, and they bogged down in the mud and in the snow of December in the Ardennes forest in Belgium and France. The war didn't end on time. The result was that the optimism of the post office section of the Army, which started to return packages
Christmas
from
packages.
France, Christmas packages from France to America, became a great mistake, like many other mistakes that happened then. The soldiers did not get their Christmas presents. Instead, they got the Germans for Christmas.
And in fact, Eisenhower was so sure that the war would end by Christmas that he bet General Montgomery £5 that it would be over by then.
He realized very soon that he was going to have to pay that £5. But Montgomery was so sure the war wouldn't end that he was planning to go home to play golf in Scotland. He didn't succeed in that. And Eisenhower was actually trapped in his own headquarters because the Germans had taken uniforms and equipment that they had gotten from captured Americans or killed Americans, dressed their own soldiers in them, and came across the lines. And one of the, call them Halloween costume Germans, said that they had come over to kidnap Eisenhower. And Eisenhower's staff was so terrified by that, they wouldn't let him out of his headquarters, and they put another person in his uniform to go back and forth, hoping to save Eisenhower from kidnapping. It was a very confusing time.
What is it about Christmas? This is at least the third military history that you've written that revolves around the theme of Christmas. I'm thinking of Silent Night, the Christmas Truce of 1914, General Washington and Valley Forge, and now this book.
Christmas is a time when soldiers who are away from home think of home, and home becomes very important, and the holiday reflects the past, what they've left. These are all accidents. It doesn't happen that something is targeted at Christmas. The Christmas Truce of 1914 that I wrote about in Silent Night happened because the troops actually were sent Christmas boxes by their own governments, and they had something that they could trade. And it happened on Christmas Eve that circumstances made it possible for them to literally get together. In World War II, in 1944, we thought the war would end by Christmas, and it just so happened that in mid-December, the Germans had gathered enough equipment and men to try for their last desperate counterattack.
And we should mention that this was their fourth Christmas fighting in World War II.
This was the fourth American Christmas in World War II, and no one thought that it would be a wartime Christmas. But the Germans took advantage of that nostalgia for home on the part of the Americans, hoping to inculcate some defeatism by broadcasting across the lines, Americans, do you want to die for Christmas? And no one wants to die for Christmas. No one wants to be the last person to die in a war. And the Americans thought the war was nearly over.
What impact did that have psychologically on the soldiers at the front line, and were most aware even, obviously it was very cold, one of the coldest, snowiest winters on record, but were they aware even that it was Christmas time?
For many, they weren't aware until the Germans let them know that Christmas was coming. Very few of them had access to radios that broadcast anything. I found one tank crew had actually jury-rigged a radio and were able to pick up broadcasts from England of Christmas carols, and suddenly they heard carols. Troops that were captured sang Christmas carols in the boxcars in which the Germans transported them back to prison camps. At one point, an American air raid came along, and the soldiers had to spill out of the boxcars into the snow, and the American raid killed some of the soldiers. One of them had sung carols in the boxcar in a beautiful voice, and when they got back into the car, a soldier in the darkness called out, "Hey, tenor, give us some more of your Christmas carols." And somebody said, he's dead. He hadn't survived that raid. We called that friendly fire. Obviously it was not.
Tens of thousands of pages have been written about the Battle of the Bulge, but yours is a little bit different. Yours relies on diary entries and letters written by generals and by ordinary soldiers. Why did you write your book in more of a narrative manner?
I come out of biography. Much of my work is in biography, and what I'm interested in is the human face of war. What does it look like from the ordinary GI standpoint? Who looks at things very differently and is up closer to war than many of the generals. Many of our leading generals in the period of the Battle of the Bulge were actually partying in Paris, waiting for Christmas to come in posh hotels. They weren't involved at all. It's very seldom that you get a leading figure with a lot of stars on his shoulders or on his collar to be involved in a war. George Patton, who is pretty much the hero of this book and who is a kind of over-the-top general, was actually there with the troops. On one occasion, he tripped over the legs of a soldier who was sleeping under his Jeep because he was just worn out. And the soldier said something which we can't repeat on the air, and Patton took it very lightly. He understood.
In fact, Patton himself commented upon the strange paradox of such brutal fighting during the Christmas time, and he said, in his diary he wrote, "It's a clear, cold Christmas, lovely weather for killing Germans, which seems queer, seeing whose birthday it is."
He even prayed for good weather, going to a chapel in Luxembourg and calling on God as if God were a senior general. "Sir, we need good weather for killing Germans." And whether or not the prayer worked, he got his good weather for 4 days, which is all he asked for.
And the aerial bombardment was possible and did help.
Yes, it was possible to see the enemy from the air and to target the artillery on them, and it was the Germans' last hurrah.
Why was it that Eisenhower never wanted it to be called the Battle of the Bulge, which of course is what it became known popularly? He wanted it to be called the Ardennes Battle.
He didn't even want it to be called the Ardennes Battle. He wanted it to be just one phase of the war in France against Germany. I think he was embarrassed by the fact that there was such a gross intelligence failure, that we didn't know the Germans in secret were preparing for this under the darkness and under the cover of early winter rains and snow. They were able to get away with an offensive that they thought might delay the end of the war. I don't think they ever thought it could win the war, but it did delay the end of the war from perhaps Christmas time to early spring.
All right. Thanks so much for talking with us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
A copy of the program you've just seen can be purchased through Penn State Media Sales at mediasales.psu.edu or by calling 800-770-2111.